The heat in Ouagadougou that morning felt unnatural, not just because the sun burned through the red dust horizon like a branding iron, but because something unseen clung to the air, tension, heavy and sour. President Ibrahim Traore stood at the balcony of the presidential palace, staring down at the capital with a look only men carved by war and betrayal could wear. He had survived many storms, foreign plots, economic strangulation, even a military mutiny, but nothing rattled him like what he had just heard. A single sentence from his intelligence chief, whispered like a death sentence over morning coffee. "Mr. President, we believe the betrayal is coming from inside your war room." His heart hadn't pounded like that since the battlefield in Djibo. The betrayal, if real, meant everything he fought for was now bleeding from within. The intel was raw, unverified, but the source was Aminata Keita, his most trusted intelligence officer, a woman who'd once pulled him from a burning convoy with her bare hands. If she said there was a traitor in his circle, he couldn't dismiss it. Traore turned to his advisor, General Kabore, a thick-built man with an iron jaw and history carved into every scar. "You know what this means," Traore said. Kabore didn't blink. "Yes. If we move too fast, we scare the rat. Too slow, and we lose the whole ship. Then we play the long game," the president whispered. "But we play it smart." He would root out the betrayal, not with brute force, but with strategy. He was done fighting in the open. This war would be of shadows. 2 days later, Traore summoned a late-night meeting in the palace bunker. Only 6 people were invited. His national security team, each one a pillar of the new Burkina Faso. As the heavy vault door closed behind them, Keita slipped into the observation chamber behind a one-way mirror. She watched each face, studying, measuring. The traitor was in this room. She could feel it in her bones. Traore, calm as a general before a charge, paced slowly in front of them. Lately, he began, "I've had the feeling that someone among us is not just failing this nation, but sabotaging it." No one moved. "I won't accuse," he continued, "but I will test your loyalty. In 2 days, we are to move a critical shipment of arms to Fata and Gorma. I will hand each of you different coordinates. Only one is real." He paused. "If any enemy forces attack the convoy, I will know whose coordinates leaked." Silence. And then a voice, smooth, calculated, from Colonel Malik Konate. "A clever move, Mr. President," he said. "Let the guilty hang themselves." Traore watched his face, not a flicker. Konate had been a hero in the uprising, but something about his recent silence in cabinet meetings and the foreign bank transfers, traced by Keita, gnawed at Traore's mind. As they filed out, Traore stayed behind. Keita entered quietly. "I saw his eyes," she said. "He's either innocent or he's better than I thought." Traore nodded. "Prepare the decoy convoy. I want them guarded like the real thing. And if it's Konate, then we make him think he's winning. Let him believe his plan is working." By dawn, the plan was in motion. Konate received coordinates to an area near the Togo border. He made no comment, but that night, encrypted transmissions pinged from his secure comms terminal. Keita traced them, masked her IP, and smiled. The message went to a private satellite uplink. Someone out there was waiting, and someone here had just exposed themselves. But Traore didn't act yet. He needed to know who else was involved. The next day, the decoy convoy left Ouagadougou under heavy escort. They didn't make it past Kombasiri. RPG fire erupted from tree lines. An ambush, precise, surgical. But Traore's men had anticipated it. Within minutes, they counterattacked. Drones caught high-res footage of 2 insurgents fleeing on motorbikes toward the border. One of them, later identified, was a dismissed military officer, discharged for insubordination months earlier by Konate himself. Proof was mounting, but Traore still didn't move. He needed to understand the why. He summoned Konate to the palace for a private meeting. The colonel arrived with his usual charm and straight posture, but behind his polished salute, Traore saw it, the flicker of fear. "Colonel," the president began, "you served this country well, but I've learned that even lions can forget their pride." Konate's smile was slow, cold. "What exactly are you implying, Mr. President?" Konate's smile was slow, cold, unless you feel guilty. That night, Keita found another message sent from Konaté's secure phone. He knows. We accelerate the plan. And just like that, it was no longer a test. It was a countdown. The red moon rose over Ouagadougou like a warning, blood-streaked and unsettling. Inside the presidential war room, Ibrahim Traore stood alone, eyes fixed on the digital map of Burkina Faso. Colored markers blinked across the screen. Convoys, rebel camps, civilian safe zones, but only one dot mattered now. The moving pin representing Colonel Konaté's encrypted phone. It was headed toward an estate on the outskirts of Zignare, a compound that officially didn't exist. Traore had only been there once, years ago during a clandestine meeting with old resistance leaders. It was off-grid, shielded by a wall of silence and money. If Konaté was going there, the betrayal was deeper than anyone had guessed. A door opened. Aminata Keita entered silently, dressed in black, sidearm at her waist. "He's there," she said. We intercepted another message. It was brief but clear. "Strike when he speaks. Use the widow." Traore turned slowly, eyebrows furrowed. "The widow, code name," she replied. "We believe it refers to someone inside your public relations office, possibly someone close to you." He closed his eyes for a second. There was a speech scheduled the next day, his first televised address in months, at the new school built in the heart of a former war zone, a symbol of renewal. Now it might become the stage for assassination. "We cancel the speech," Keita said immediately. "No," Traore said. "That's what they'd expect. If we flinch, they win. I will give that speech. You'll be a sitting duck, sir. Not if we bait the trap properly." By dawn, Keita and her team had devised a counter-operation. They would allow the plan to unfold, stage everything as if the president were unaware, while setting up layers of surveillance, snipers and decoys. Still, something didn't sit right. Traore had fought in enough wars to know the difference between a desperate plot and a coordinated inside job. This felt like the latter, and it meant one thing: Konaté wasn't alone. Someone higher, richer, or far more dangerous was backing him. That evening, the president called an emergency meeting, not with his generals, but with two people from outside the military: journalist Samuel Douamba and economic advisor Zoe Ilbudo. Samuel had been a thorn in the side of the government for years, blunt, critical, fearless. But Traore respected him. He was one of the few who still spoke truth to power. "I need your eyes," the president said bluntly, handing Samuel a dossier. "Read, don't react." As Samuel flipped through the pages, his eyes narrowed. This is treason," he muttered. "And you're saying Konaté is behind it?" "Konaté and someone else, someone who's been using state funds to finance this network. I need a leak, Samuel. I need a public explosion, but it has to come from outside the palace. You want me to publish this?" "Yes, under one condition. You hold the final piece until I give the signal. Leak enough to stir the nest, not enough to expose our play." Samuel nodded, still visibly stunned. Zoe leaned forward. "And what do you want from me, sir?" "Your financial report on defense contracts from the last quarter. There's something off in the numbers." She hesitated, then nodded. "There is. I wasn't sure who to trust, but
Yes.
someone has been rerouting aid money through shell companies in Niger and Mali. I traced it to a firm linked to Konaté's cousin." "Good. Prepare to present it after the speech tomorrow, publicly." The day arrived. The sun blazed over the refurbished schoolyard, where children with new backpacks and journalists with microphones gathered side by side. Traore arrived in a plain armored vehicle, not his usual motorcade. His speech would be delivered from a stage backed by the nation's flag and the slogan, "From ashes we rise." What no one knew, except Keita and three trusted guards, was that the man stepping onto the stage wasn't Traore at all. It was a decoy, an actor who bore a stunning resemblance, trained for this exact moment. The real president watched from a rooftop 2 blocks away, binoculars in hand. Keita whispered beside him, "Sniper team in position." Widow not in sight yet. Then she paused, eyes narrowing on a woman moving through the crowd with a child. There, the woman mid-30s, headscarf, pushing a stroller, walked too deliberately, too perfectly placed. Her jacket bulged just enough to suggest something metallic underneath. "Trigger team, hold." Keita whispered. We need her alive. As the actor-president began the speech, the woman's hand slipped into her coat. A sudden shout broke the air. One of the school children, accidentally or not, tripped over her stroller, exposing the hidden firearm. Chaos erupted. Guards swarmed. The woman reached for her weapon, but Keita's agents were faster. Within seconds, she was pinned, screaming in full due. You were supposed to be alone. They dragged her away. Keita turned to Traore. We got her. He didn't blink. Check her comms. I want to know who was supposed to be watching. That night, they cracked her device. Messages, calls, and one recorded voice file. A conversation between Konate and someone with a heavy European accent. He trusts you. You'll be standing behind him. All it takes is one pull of the trigger, and Burkina Faso returns to sanity. The voice chilled Traore to the bone. He knew that accent. It was Lucien Marchand, former French intelligence attaché, expelled last year for diplomatic misconduct. So this wasn't just internal, it was international, and that changed everything. The night after the failed assassination attempt, Ouagadougou pulsed with a false calm, like a city holding its breath. President Ibrahim Traore knew better than to mistake quiet for peace. If Lucien Marchand was involved, this was no longer a power grab. It was geopolitical war. At 2:13 a.m., he stood in the Situation Room with Aminata Keita, General Cabaret, and Zoe Ilbudo. The intercepted audio file played again, echoing through the steel-paneled walls. Burkina Faso returns to sanity. Lucien's voice hissed, dripping with disdain. Keita's fists clenched. So it was never just Konate, it's France, or at least a faction within it. Zoe, eyes fixed on the playback monitor, added, or a proxy. Marchand never acts without layers. If he's in, then the money trail goes deeper. Traore didn't speak. He watched the waveform of the audio. Like it held answers the words couldn't. Finally, he turned to Keita. We need to break the chain, one link at a time. Start with Konate. Cabaret leaned in. He's moving tonight. A private jet scheduled to depart from Bobo Dioulasso. Likely heading toward Abidjan or Casablanca. Have we confirmed? Traore asked. Almost. But we can't intercept him without risking diplomatic fallout. The president's jaw tightened. Then we don't intercept. We invite. At dawn, Konate was summoned back to the palace. His convoy was met with full military honors, smoke and mirrors to disarm his suspicion. When he entered the chamber, Traore stood waiting alone. Ibrahim, Konate said, smiling. To what do I owe this early pleasure? Traore didn't smile back. Sit. Konate hesitated, then complied. Room was quiet. You aides. No generals. Just two men who once fought side by side, now playing chess with loaded guns beneath the table. Traore folded his hands. I know everything, Malik. The fake convoy, the payments, the widow, and Marchand. Silence. Konate didn't flinch. That's a dangerous accusation, Mr. President. Tis truth. Traore reached into a drawer, pulled out a flash drive, and tossed it onto the table. Play it. Konate picked it up, eyes flickering for the first time. He knew what it was. He didn't even need to hear it, but he inserted it into the laptop nearby. Voice of Lucien Marchand filled the room. Konate sat frozen, breathing shallow, jaw clenched. When it ended, Traore leaned forward. You betrayed your nation, but not for power, for fear. A long pause. Then Konate spoke. Burkina Faso is a land of lions surrounded by wolves. I did what I had to do to survive. No, Traore said quietly. You did what you were told, and you dressed it in patriotism. Konate's voice broke. You think you've won, but it's not over. Marchand's plan was only phase 1. Traore's eyes narrowed. Then you'll help us stop phase 2. Konate laughed bitterly. Why would I? Because I'm not giving you the rope. I'm giving you a knife. You can stab us both, or cut yourself free. The silence that followed was thick with the weight of two futures. Konate didn't leave the palace that day. He was placed under silent house arrest, not in a prison cell, but in the same suite he'd once helped design for foreign dignitaries. Keita watched him from surveillance, noting the shift. He wasn't panicking, he was reflecting. Meanwhile, Zoe Ilbudo worked through the financial records, uncovering a web of laundering through NGOs and humanitarian fronts. The most shocking part wasn't the volume of money, it was the names attached. 2 cabinet members, 1 former UN advisor, and a foreign aid consultant linked directly to the French embassy. The president stared at the printed ledger. "They were bleeding us," he muttered, feeding insurgencies with one hand while offering peacekeeping missions with the other. Samuel Douamba published his exposé that night, with headlines that rocked the region. Betrayal at the top, the hidden war on Burkina Faso. The world watched. The French government, cornered, issued a statement denouncing rogue operatives, but denied any official involvement. Marchand, of course, had disappeared, but Traoré didn't want statements. He wanted leverage, and he knew exactly where to find it. 2 nights later, under the cover of darkness, Keita led a team across the border into Niger. Their objective, seize an accountant named Joseph Meïti, the man who managed the laundering network and had once been Marchand's handler. The operation was surgical. By 4 a.m., Keita Meïti was on a chopper back to Burkina Faso, hands cuffed, eyes terrified. Traoré met him face to face in an underground chamber. No suits, no protocols, just a table, a light, and consequences. "I'm not asking you to confess," Traoré said, "because if you don't, Marchand will make sure your family disappears next." The intel he gave unlocked everything. Communications between Marchand and a network of rebel leaders, plans to sabotage upcoming elections, and a secondary hit list. Journalists, village leaders, and even Keita herself. Traoré looked over the list and said quietly, "They were building an invisible guillotine." He turned to Keita. "We're going to cut the rope before it falls." But there was one name missing from Meïti's files. One person who had been referenced only by code name, Mamba. The files hinted that Mamba was not just a spy, but the actual architect of the betrayal. Possibly even higher than Marchand. "Who is Mamba?" Keita asked. Meïti shook his head. "I never saw his face, but he spoke Mossi, with a southern accent." Traoré's face hardened. "That narrows it," Keita whispered. "If Mamba is real, he could be anyone in the inner circle." Traoré didn't hesitate. "Then we flushed the circle." The final act was approaching, and the deadliest enemy was still within the palace. A week later, the presidential palace was a fortress, tense, bristling with weapons and paranoia. Every hallway was swept, every room scanned for listening devices. Loyalty oaths were renewed in whispered tones. Still, the traitor named Mamba remained hidden like a snake in the grass. Traoré barely slept. In moments of silence, he'd stare out the window at the flickering city lights of Ouagadougou, wondering which of those lights hid a knife meant for his back. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about the soul of Burkina Faso. At 6 a.m., Keita knocked on his door with an update. Meïti confirmed something new, she said. Mamba wasn't just leaking intel. He was altering presidential directives, changing language in the security memos you signed. Traoré's eyes sharpened. That would mean Mamba had access to the presidential seal. Only 3 people do. He didn't say their names out loud. He didn't need to. General Kabore, Chief of Staff Diallo, and Zoe Ilbudo. Keita hesitated. "You trust Zoe?" "I did. But trust is the first casualty of betrayal." He sat down heavily. "We run a loyalty protocol. All 3. No notice. I want voice stress tests, biometric scans, and psych evaluations." "Starting with who?" Traoré looked up. "Start with me. Then they'll know I'm not above scrutiny." The tests began within hours. Keita's unit conducted them with surgical neutrality. President Traoré passed cleanly. Keita Boré passed, though his blood pressure spiked when asked about Meïti. Then came Diallo. Chief of Staff Ousmane Diallo had been with the administration since the uprising. Polished, well-spoken, efficient. He was the kind of man the West loved to praise. Calm, measured, fluent in 5 languages. But when asked whether he had modified any national directive without presidential approval, a tremor fluttered across his vocal frequency. Keita noticed it immediately. Then came the biometric signature scan. The results showed a 93% match between Diallo's handwriting and a recently authenticated intelligence memo that directed military aid away from rebel hotspots. She brought the report to Traore. He stared at it in silence. "He's Mamba," Keita said. "No," Traore replied. "He's the face of Mamba, but not the mind. Diallo is a mouthpiece, controlled." Keita frowned. "Then who's the mind?" Traore didn't answer. He was already reaching for the red phone, the one line that went directly to Konaté's suite. In the gold-trimmed security suite, Konaté was sitting at the window when Traore entered. The former colonel looked different, now gaunt, quieter, humbled. "You lied to me," Traore said simply. Konaté turned, eyes tired. "About what, Mamba?" Konaté didn't deny it. He sighed. "I didn't know his name, but I knew there was someone behind the curtain. I thought it was Marchand, but I was wrong. Then help me finish this." Konaté met his gaze. "On one condition. When this ends, let me walk. I'll vanish. No trial, no legacy. You don't get to set the terms." Traore snapped. "No," Konaté said, "but I still know where the curtain ends." That night, Konaté handed Keita a list of offshore assets, tied to a name they hadn't expected. Ambassador Isaka Sanu, Burkina Faso's diplomatic envoy to the African Union. A charismatic statesman, Sanu had once been considered a potential successor to Traore. He had the smile for TV, the voice for parliament, and apparently the spine for treason. Using his immunity and diplomatic access, Sanu had routed intelligence and funds through embassies in Senegal, Ghana, and Rwanda. He had met Marchand in Addis Ababa 3 months before the coup attempt, and he was due to return to Burkina Faso in 48 hours. Traore made a decision. "We take him down publicly," he told his team. "If we don't show strength now, the continent sees us as weak." "But how?" Keita asked. "He's returning for the Unity Summit. International press will be everywhere." "Exactly," Traore said. "Let the world watch." 2 days later, the Unity Summit opened in Ouagadougou under heavy security. Leaders from across West Africa filled the marble hall of the People's Assembly. Cameras rolled, flags waved, and the national orchestra played with somber pride. Sanu entered with the grace of a king, smiling for cameras, shaking hands, embracing dignitaries. But Traore, watching from behind the curtain, saw it clearly now, the arrogance of a man who believed he was untouchable. When Traore took the stage, he began with a rousing call for African sovereignty and solidarity. But then his tone shifted. "There can be no unity," he said, "without truth." He raised a folder and held it high. "This is a list of assets, illegal assets, used to fund rebellion, terrorism, and political manipulation in Burkina Faso. These accounts are linked not to outsiders, but to one of our own." Gasps filled the chamber. He turned to face Sanu directly. "Ambassador Isaka Sanu, you stand accused of high treason." The cameras caught the shock on Sanu's face. He started to rise, to protest, but 2 guards moved in, placing firm hands on his shoulders. Sanu's voice rose above the noise. "This is madness, a fabrication." But then another figure stood, Konaté, escorted into the room, wearing civilian clothes. "It's no fabrication," he said loudly. "I was part of it, and he was my handler." The room erupted. Within hours, international media blasted headlines. Traore unmasks coup financier at Unity Summit. Former ally confesses in live tribunal. Burkina Faso strikes back. The French government issued a second, more nervous statement, promising a full investigation into Marchand and calling Sanu's arrest an internal matter. But Traore knew the war wasn't over. Not yet. He stood on the roof that night, with Keita, looking out over the city. "We cut off the head," she said, "but the body still twitches." "Yes," he replied, "but now the people know the truth, and that's the first step toward redemption." The sun rose slowly over Ouagadougou, the next morning bathing the city in soft golden light, as if even the heavens needed time to absorb what had happened. The arrest of Ambassador Isaka Sanu had rocked not only Burkina Faso but the entire African continent. No one had expected President Ibrahim Traore to strike that publicly, that boldly, and yet it was the move of a man with nothing left to prove and everything left to protect. Still, Traore was not celebrating. He sat alone in his office, watching the footage again, Sanu's face, Konaté's confession, the stunned silence of the chamber. It had played out like a drama, but for Traore was all too real. He hadn't slept. Not after receiving Kiita's final report. Marchand was still missing. 3 French nationals had fled Burkina Faso overnight. The shell companies were collapsing, but remnants of their influence still lingered, like venom long after the snake had been beheaded. And worst of all, there were whispers now, voices online, foreign press headlines, spinning the events as a consolidation of power, rather than a defense of sovereignty. Traore turned the monitor off. There was one final thread he had to tie. That afternoon, he ordered Konaté to be brought to him, not in chains, not in secrecy, in daylight. In plain view of the staff, when Konaté entered, he didn't bow or salute. He simply stood, waiting. "I read your file again," Traore said. "You weren't just a traitor. You weren't just a traitor. You were a believer, turned cynic." Konaté nodded. "And you were a dreamer who learned to fight. Do you still believe the country can survive without blood?" Konaté looked out the window. "Not without truth first. And you gave them that. You helped. You could have stayed silent." "I almost did." Traore studied him carefully. "The people will want justice. You may have confessed, but you betrayed your oath. You manipulated your brothers in arms. You endangered millions." Konaté nodded again, this time slowly. "I know. I won't run from it." "And yet," Traore said, "I'm giving you a choice." The president opened a small envelope and slid it across the desk. Inside 2 documents. One was a pardon. The other was a sealed deployment order, assigning Konaté to a covert military advisory position in the country's most volatile northern region. Konaté stared at them. "Redemption doesn't come in applause or forgiveness," Traore said. "It comes in rebuilding what you helped break." Konaté didn't hesitate. He picked up the deployment order. "I'm not dying a hero, Mr. President." "Oh," Traore said, rising. "But you might live like one again." They shook hands, firm, silent. There was no joy in the gesture, but there was something else. Finality. 3 days later, Zoe Ilbudo stood beside Traore as they walked the grounds of the newly reopened school, the same one that had almost become a stage for his assassination. Now children played freely. A new mural covered the back wall, painted by local artists. It read in bold letters, "Truth is the shield of the nation." Zoe handed him a small report. "It's done," she said. "Every account frozen, every complicit advisor removed. We've bled, but we're healing." He looked around at the children, the staff, the sunlight. "It's strange," he said, "how betrayal can sharpen your vision. It can also make you cold." "I hope not," he replied. "I want to stay human, even if the world isn't." Zoe paused. "Do you trust me now?" He smiled faintly. "I never stopped. I just had to learn how to trust differently." That evening, Traore delivered a final address from the National Assembly. It was not triumphant. It was quiet, stripped of grandeur. He didn't speak as a victor. He spoke as a man who had stood in fire and survived. "My fellow Burkinabe," he began, "this is not a speech of glory. It is a confession." He paused. "I have trusted wrong men. I have doubted right ones. I have seen the lines between loyalty and ambition blur. And I have learned that power is not measured in how many enemies you defeat, but in how many of your people you still deserve to lead." The silence in the chamber was complete. He continued, "Today we begin again, not from scratch but from truth. We will rebuild not only our institutions but our relationships, between soldiers and citizens, between leaders and the led, between the wounds and the healing." Outside, the crowds erupted in applause, but inside, Traore just closed his eyes for a moment. He had survived the betrayal. Now he had to survive redemption. 1 year later, in the northern town of Dori, a convoy of aid trucks rumbled through dusty roads, guarded by a quiet, sharp-eyed man in military fatigues. Colonel Malik Konate. Locals didn't know his full story. They only knew that he arrived after the worst had passed, rebuilt their defenses, and never once asked for thanks. Some said he never smiled. Others said he talked to the children in the evenings, teaching them war stories, not to glorify violence, but to explain the cost of silence. One little girl asked him once, "Why do you protect us?" He replied, "Because I failed to protect others." And in Ouagadougou, President Ibrahim Traore walked the streets without a motorcade. No bulletproof glass, just him, his boots, and his people. A man stopped him at a market. "President," he said, "you still walk among us?" Traore smiled gently. "Only because you still let me." The man laughed. "Some of us wanted your head last year. I wanted my own some nights. But we've come through." "Yes," Traore said, shaking his hand. Together, the man looked down at the vegetables in his stall. "You'll be betrayed again, you know." "I will," Traore said. "But I'd rather lead with open eyes than hide behind walls." And with that, the president walked on. Through the dust, through the echoes of war and whispers of peace. He was not untouchable, but he was unshaken. The golden seal shimmered under the light of the Burkina Faso sunrise. President Ibrahim Traore held the thick envelope in his hands, reading its bold, formal lines for the 5th time. It was signed personally by U.S. President Donald J. Trump. President Ibrahim Traore is cordially invited to the Global Stability and Security Summit in Istanbul. Attendance is highly encouraged to strengthen regional and international cooperation. He chuckled softly. "Highly encouraged was diplomatic for you, better show up, or consequences follow." Traore set the envelope down on his desk inside the modest but fortified presidential office in Ouagadougou. The walls around him were bare stone and local textiles. No gold-plated opulence, no framed photo ops. This was a president of revolution, not spectacle. "Let them come," he said to his advisor. Aminata Keita, the black-haired intelligence officer, known for her blunt assessments, crossed her arms. "You know what this means, Ibrahim. Trump wants to humiliate you, publicly." Traore's eyes narrowed, but his voice remained calm. "Then let him try." In Washington, D.C., Trump was reviewing satellite maps and troop movements, with a mixture of theatrical flair and calculated ambition. Since returning to the White House after a controversial second election, he had vowed to re-establish American dominance, what he called total world balance. For him, that meant weakening every rising bloc, BRICS, SAS, CO, and most recently, or fries. Traore, Trump muttered, the name bitter in his mouth. "The kid who thinks he's Malcolm X with a bazooka." "Sir," his national security advisor interrupted. "Our intel confirms he's forming tighter energy deals with Turkey, Russia, and even Iran. If he succeeds, we'll lose leverage in West Africa entirely." Trump turned to the press secretary. "Leak the invite. Let the world know he's coming to our table. Then make sure we own the table." 2 weeks later, Istanbul stood still. It wasn't every day that a geopolitical confrontation simmered just beneath the chandeliers of a 500-year-old Ottoman palace. Heads of state poured in: India, Germany, Brazil, Nigeria, and even a surprise delegate from China. But the cameras only cared about 2 men, the man in the red beret and the man in the red tie. When Traore arrived at the summit, he didn't come with a large delegation. Just 3 aides, 1 translator, and Aminata Keita. He wore his military uniform, crisp and clean, with medals that weren't bought but earned. The moment he entered the hall, Trump saw him and smiled wide, that signature showman grin. "Welcome, Ibrahim," he said, hand outstretched. Traore paused. Then he shook the hand, but didn't smile. "Mr. President," Traore said, his voice deep and even, "I came not to bow but to build." Trump's grin didn't fade, but his eyes twitched. "Well, let's see if your building passes inspection," Trump replied. The summit began with pleasantries, handshakes, and champagne. But behind closed doors, storm clouds formed. In a restricted bilateral session, the 2 presidents sat across from each other, with only their closest advisors. Trump went straight to the point. Withdraw a FRISIC military cooperation with Russia, and will double development funds to Burkina Faso. Immediate access to American tech, weapons, infrastructure. Traore leaned back. You mean trade independence for dependency? No deal. Trump's tone darkened. You're playing with fire, Ibrahim. You might think the world is rooting for you, but the second you stop being useful, they'll abandon you. Just like Gaddafi, just like Lumumba. Traore looked him dead in the eye. I am not Gaddafi, and you are not Reagan. Keita reached for her sidearm, under the table instinctively. She'd seen how quickly these meetings could turn bloody. Trump taken aback for a moment, then chuckled. You've got spirit, kid, but spirit doesn't win wars. Traore stood up slowly. No, but it does start revolutions. The door burst open. A Turkish aide entered, face pale. Mr. President, there's been a leak, a video. It shows U.S. operatives near a FRISIC oil depots in Mali, armed. Trump's face turned red. What the hell? Traore smiled. Like I said, Mr. President, I came to build. But first I had to see who was trying to burn it down. The leaked footage dominated global headlines within hours. On every major news outlet, shaky infrared drone footage revealed U.S. operatives, faces blurred but uniforms identifiable, planting electronic devices near a FRISIC oil pipelines in Mali. Analysts debated whether it was sabotage, surveillance, or something worse. In Istanbul, the summit's atmosphere changed overnight. Damage control. Now Trump barked, pacing behind closed doors at his private suite in the Tehran Palace Kempinski. His advisors scrambled, statements were drafted, counter-narratives spun, and the blame redirected, first to rogue contractors, then to a miscommunication with local intelligence units. But the world wasn't buying it. Meanwhile, President Ibrahim Traore was silent. He gave no press conference, no sound bites. Instead, he was in a secure room with Turkish intelligence officers and his advisor Aminata Keita, studying additional leaked materials delivered overnight, emails, intercepted calls, and one chilling transcript, an audio file of a U.S. envoy speaking to a French general. Phase 2 goes active if he doesn't fold. Istanbul is our opportunity. What's Phase 2? Keita asked, narrowing her eyes. The Turkish agent answered grimly. Assassination. Traore exhaled slowly, but not in shock. He had anticipated it. I want security tripled, he ordered, and verify every staff member's clearance, even Turkish staff. No assumptions. Back at the summit, Trump strutted to the press room for a statement. The footage is unfortunate, but it's being investigated. Let's be clear. America remains committed to global stability. Any implication otherwise is fake news. But no one applauded. In fact, many journalists looked to the side, waiting for Traore. Later that afternoon, an emergency closed-door session was convened. Turkey's president, who had hosted the summit as a neutral party, requested both leaders to appear before a select council of global representatives to clarify the situation. As they entered, all eyes were on Traore and Trump. The American president, full of bravado, opened first. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to personally clarify that any U.S. operations in West Africa are strictly within the scope of mutual defense and anti-terror protocols. Any recent footage is either misinterpreted or the work of unauthorized actors. Traore didn't interrupt. He waited, then stood. What the President of the United States fails to mention, Traore began, voice calm but sharp, is that his so-called defense protocols are violations of African sovereignty. He speaks of unauthorized actors, but the authorization came from his own pen. We have recordings, documents, and field agents who testify otherwise. A sharp murmur swept through the room. Traore continued, let us be honest. A FRISIC is a threat, not to the world, but to the world order the West built for itself. An order where Africa remains a resource zone, not a power. We are not your chessboard anymore. Trump rose to respond, face redder than usual. Let me tell you something, son. You're walking into a storm, and I've weathered bigger ones than you. You talk about order? Without American order, your region would be a war zone of coups and caliphates. And whose weapons built those war zones? Traore fired back. Your companies, You're mercenaries. You're contractors. The room went silent. The Turkish president tried to mediate. Gentlemen, please. But the confrontation had already drawn the lines. Suddenly, Traore dropped a folder on the table in front of everyone. Inside, real-time satellite imagery, showing American contractors with Blackwell Corp logos, known private military affiliates, guarding unmarked shipments in northern Mali. Delivered just 40 minutes ago, Keita whispered beside him. Trump's delegation stirred uneasily. Traore's voice didn't rise, but it cut deeper. You call it stability. I call it shadow colonization. Trump stood, pointing a finger. This is a setup. He's working with Russia, with Iran, with anyone who hates America. You want to be a martyr? Go ahead. But don't pretend you're Moses when you're dancing with pharaohs. Traore stared back. I've seen your pharaohs, Donald. They wear suits in boardrooms and drop bombs with smiles. For a long second, no one moved. Not the German chancellor, not the Nigerian president, not even the Chinese diplomat. Traore turned to them all. I will not fight in silence while they kill in secret. We either change the rules or we admit the rules were always lies. The room broke into stunned whispering. Even Trump, seasoned in showdowns, realized he'd underestimated this young African leader. Traore wasn't playing defense. He was rewriting the game. That evening, Istanbul was anything but calm. Security forces swarmed the summit venue. Unmarked vehicles came and went under the cover of darkness. Inside the palace, the corridors whispered with rumors of plots, spies, and something worse. In a discreet back hallway, Aminata Keita stood silently beside a Turkish intelligence officer. On her earpiece, her team's voice was low but urgent. We've intercepted chatter, multiple encrypted messages between an American diplomat and someone embedded in the Turkish staff. Phrases include green lights, diversion window, and most disturbingly clear line of sight. Aminata stiffened. Get Traore out. Now, she hissed, already moving down the hall. But Traore wouldn't leave. I won't be chased from a summit like a fugitive, he told her firmly, when she found him. He was sitting calmly in his suite, reading a copy of The Wretched of the Earth. That's exactly what they want, to make me look scared. Weak, like a revolutionary pretending to lead. She slammed the book shut. And what will it prove if you end up in a coffin? There was a long silence. He stood and put a hand on her shoulder. Keita, fear is how they've ruled us for a century. That ends now. In a luxury suite 2 floors above, Trump was pacing like a tiger in a cage. His aides were arguing. Some wanted to confront the media. Others begged him to lay low until damage control settled. Trump, agitated, turned to his body man. Samuels, have they responded to the contingency? They're unsure, Samuels replied, checking his encrypted device. Too much noise on the Turkish end. The cleaner might be compromised. Trump grunted, then get someone else. I'm not losing to some junior officer in jungle fatigues. At 2:41 a.m., the fire alarm blared. Panic swept through the hotel. Delegates rushed from their rooms. Security teams swarmed, escorting world leaders to designated safe zones. But it wasn't a fire. It was a setup. In the chaos, 2 individuals dressed as Turkish staff moved swiftly through a service corridor, armed with silenced pistols and a small drone. Their mission was surgical: eliminate the threat, Traore, and escape before sunrise. They didn't expect Keita. She intercepted them in the south stairwell. The firefight lasted seconds. One went down with a shot to the neck. The other fled, wounded, leaving behind the drone and a small black satchel. Inside, neurotoxic agents, silencer rounds, and a forged Turkish pass, signed by an American diplomatic aide. Traore arrived moments later, flanked by Turkish guards. Keita, still breathing hard, tossed him the ID badge. I told you they were done playing games. Traore examined it. The seal was U.S. consular. The name J. Swan. Not on any official delegation list. The Turkish guards paled. You've been infiltrated, Keita told them. We need a secure room now. As they moved to lockdown, international media got wind of the incident. A hacked CCTV feed, someone inside the summit was leaking again, showed partial footage of the corridor shootout. Though blurry, It was clear enough to identify weapons and false uniforms. Within minutes, the footage was on social media. Hash assassination. Attempt trended worldwide. At dawn, with the summit on the brink of collapse, President Erdogan summoned an emergency session with the heads of state. It was unprecedented. There in the cold silence of the Ottoman hall, Traore took the floor again, this time not with rhetoric, but with evidence. The United States of America attempted to assassinate a sitting head of state during a peace summit. He declared, "This wasn't politics. It was war by other means." Trump stood shaking his head. "This is absurd, fabricated, a stage play by someone who thinks he's Mandela with a GoPro." Traore didn't flinch. He held up the drone from the satchel. "Then explain this. Turkish military experts confirm it was deployed to track my heat signature through reinforced walls, and this," he held up the forged pass, "was signed by a diplomat in your Istanbul consulate." Trump's face hardened. "You think this circus of evidence means anything? You're in over your head. The world is not a debate stage, Traore." "No," Ibrahim replied. "It's a battlefield disguised as a boardroom." One by one, leaders looked around the room, not at Trump but at each other. The spell of American untouchability had cracked. When Traore finished, silence followed. Then came the Turkish president's voice, low and deliberate. "Until this is fully investigated, I am suspending all U.S. intelligence privileges on Turkish soil, effective immediately." Trump stared at him in disbelief. Traore met his gaze. "I told you, I didn't come to bow." News of the attempted assassination and the Turkish president's decision to suspend U.S. intelligence privileges exploded across global media. For the first time in decades, an American president was publicly rebuked, not by a rival superpower, but by a fellow NATO ally. Overnight, a cascade of diplomatic responses began pouring in. South Africa recalled its ambassador to Washington for consultations. Bolivia issued a statement calling the summit incident an act of imperialist aggression. Even France, awkwardly caught between alliance obligations and colonial baggage in Africa, called for a transparent international investigation. The White House scrambled. Official U.S. channels labeled the accusations baseless and accused foreign actors of sowing disinformation. But in a world where raw footage and encrypted documents were circulating freely, credibility was collapsing by the hour. Inside the palace, the summit transformed into a pressure cooker. Security was tripled. Delegates were kept in isolated wings. Drone jammers filled the airwaves, and all external communications were filtered through Turkish intelligence servers. But the most dangerous current wasn't military. It was ideological. In one private chamber, Traore met with a small group of African, Latin American, and Asian leaders. They were tired, some from decades of debt diplomacy, others from oil-backed wars and secret coups. But in Traore they saw something unfamiliar. Unyielding resistance. "This is our moment," said Kenya's deputy prime minister. "The old world is crumbling, but we must be careful. If we confront too boldly, they will strike harder." "They already did," Traore replied. "The difference now is we have the cameras. The world sees them too." Mexico's foreign minister leaned forward. "And what are you suggesting, Mr. President?" "I propose a new declaration. Istanbul will not be remembered as the site of an assassination attempt, but as the birthplace of a new alignment." The room fell silent. Freisik, Mercosur, our organizations have power, but they lack coordination. What if we formed a parallel bloc, one with shared security protocols, digital defense alliances, and a rotating energy consortium outside of Western financial structures? Brazil's representative shook his head. "That would provoke direct retaliation." "It already has," Traore said. He looked them each in the eye. "You think America wants your freedom? No. They want your dependence. We will not win by asking for permission. We win by acting without it." At the same moment, 2 floors up, Trump was on a secure call with the Pentagon. "Tell CENTCOM, I want contingency ops on standby, just in case," he growled. "Sir," came the reply. "We need clarification. Are you authorizing kinetic engagement or just cyber denial protocols?" "Not yet, but I want both options ready." I didn't come here to be cornered by kids with hashtags and drone clips. But it was too late. The internet had already moved. Global influencers, whistleblower accounts, and independent journalists were dissecting the assassination attempt frame by frame. The hashtag #TraoreTruth reached over 600 million impressions in 18 hours. An emotional speech clip of Traore declaring, "I didn't come to bow" was remixed into music tracks, graffiti murals, and even protest slogans in Johannesburg and Manila. What began as a regional scandal was becoming a global reckoning, and President Traore knew exactly what to do with it. He called for a final public address to close the summit, not behind closed doors but in the open square outside the palace, where citizens and press could witness every word. Turkish officials hesitated. Security risks were enormous, but Traore insisted. "If they try again, let them do it in the open," he told Kieta. "Because I won't hide behind walls while claiming to stand for truth." The square was cordoned off by armored vehicles and rooftop snipers, but the crowd still grew. Thousands of locals, reporters, diplomats, and even summit staff filled the plaza. Drones hovered, cameras streamed live to millions. And then he stepped onto the platform. Red beret, military fatigues, unflinching gaze. Traore took the mic and scanned the sea of faces. "I stand before you not as a saint," he began, "but as a survivor of bombs dressed as aid, of policies sold as partnership, of friends who came offering help but brought chains." He paused as the crowd absorbed his words. This summit was meant to reinforce global unity, but it revealed something else. That unity cannot be forced, and peace cannot come from the barrel of a foreign gun. He raised the forged ID badge from the assassination attempt. "This is what they brought to the table. Not dialogue, but death." The audience murmured, "I do not hate the West. I do not hate America. I hate hypocrisy, and I know many Americans do too. The truth is, we do not want their fall. We want our rise." Applause erupted. The speech broadcast live across platforms, except in the US, where certain segments were mysteriously censored. In a private lounge, Trump watched the screen, teeth clenched. "This isn't over," he muttered. And it wasn't, because what Ibrahim Traore unleashed that day was not just a political defiance, but a global movement. The morning after Traore's speech, the mood in Istanbul was no longer one of anxiety. It was defiance. Across the city, murals of Traore began appearing overnight, his red beret framed by fiery sunbursts, painted by Turkish youth who saw in him not just an African leader, but a global symbol of resistance. On social media, the phrase, "He didn't come to bow," had become a rallying cry from Lagos to La Paz. Inside the Turan Palace, the summit's final sessions were anything but routine. Several nations broke rank with old alliances. Indonesia refused to sign a joint US-led resolution on regional security. Argentina walked out of a private meeting with NATO representatives. Even Saudi Arabia postponed a bilateral defense meeting with the US, a quiet but unmistakable signal. And then came the real shock. Traore called for an emergency declaration, not inside a quiet chamber, but on the summit's main stage, with full cameras rolling. "I propose the Istanbul Compact," he said. The hall fell still. "This will not be a military bloc, not a new NATO, but a network of equals developing nations that refuse to be pawns in great power games. We will share satellite data, build joint energy platforms, protect each other from cyber attacks and covert coups. And most importantly, we will trade in our own currencies." Trump, seated just a few feet away, leaned back, visibly irritated. Traore continued, "We've seen what your aide buys, what your advisors advise, what your diplomats disguise. We've had enough." The crowd erupted in applause, some with hesitation but others with conviction. The delegations from Ghana, Bolivia, Malaysia, and Tunisia rose first. Others soon followed. Trump's eyes narrowed. This wasn't diplomacy. This was rebellion. He stood. "You're all making a terrible mistake," he boomed. "Let me remind you who builds your roads, who trains your armies, who keeps your markets stable." Traore didn't miss a beat. "And let me remind you who paid for those roads, with our minerals, who trains your armies, with our blood, Who kept your markets stable by keeping ours broken? Trump raised a finger. You think you can build an alternative world order without us? You're dreaming. No, Traore said calmly. We're waking up. The words hit like an earthquake. By evening, 13 nations had signed the Provisional Istanbul Compact, an agreement that technically held no legal power, but symbolically shattered decades of Western dominance. Washington was in crisis mode. Pentagon officials demanded classified briefings. Wall Street analysts warned of massive capital outflows if the compact nations followed through on their own trade currencies. The CIA labeled Traore's actions as strategically destabilizing, but inside the compact nations, something else was happening. For the first time in modern memory, leaders of the global South were speaking from a place of unity, not dependency. Keita, walking through the now secured palace halls, felt it in every handshake, every nod. Oh! They're not afraid anymore, she told Traore that night. They're still afraid, he said. Oh! They've just decided to speak through it. That same night, while most delegations celebrated the day's historic turn, a different scene was unfolding in a private suite reserved for the U.S. president. Trump was fuming. He stormed toward the window, overlooking the Bosphorus. I want to pull our entire delegation, right now. Let them collapse under their fantasy. Oh! His aides begged for restraint. If we walk out now, we legitimize the compact. He didn't care. Pride had replaced strategy. Then came the call, encrypted, untraceable, from Langley. A quiet voice spoke. Sir, we intercepted chatter about the Istanbul Compact before the summit. This wasn't spontaneous. It's been brewing for months. The Chinese knew. The Russians knew. We were outmaneuvered. Trump didn't reply. He simply turned to face his reflection in the glass. Red tie slightly loosened, brow furrowed, legacy slipping. He wasn't the center of the world anymore. Elsewhere in the palace, Traore walked alone through a quiet hall lit by Ottoman lanterns. He stopped before a wall etched with poetry. In French it read, "Oh! He who builds his house with stolen bricks must fear every storm." He smiled softly. They had tried to storm him, but he was still standing. The Istanbul Compact wasn't yet a fortress, but it was a flag, planted high enough to be seen by every forgotten, exploited and underestimated nation across the globe. And Ibrahim Traore wasn't just its architect, he was its warning. 2 days after the Istanbul Compact, the summit concluded, not with a joint statement, but with a silent exodus. The United States delegation left at dawn, unannounced. No press conference, no handshake photos. Donald Trump boarded Air Force One with clenched fists and a scowl that said more than any speech could. Meanwhile, the rest of the world watched something extraordinary unfold. Back in Burkina Faso, crowds flooded Ouagadougou's streets to welcome Traore's return. It wasn't just political celebration, it was a spiritual moment. From Accra to Algiers, murals of Traore's Istanbul speech were painted on school walls and coffee shops. Civil society groups began calling for similar compacts across Latin America and Southeast Asia. In Washington, the backlash was immediate. Cable news screamed about the collapse of U.S. prestige. Senators demanded hearings. Financial analysts warned of shifts in global reserve currency trends. In closed meetings, senior Pentagon officials questioned whether America could sustain military bases in compact-aligned nations. Trump responded with fury. In a hastily arranged press briefing, he called the Istanbul Compact a paper napkin alliance of anti-American anarchists and accused Traore of colluding with China and Russia to destroy world order. But by then, the narrative had already changed. Traore didn't need to answer. Others did it for him. Global youth movements began citing the compact in rallies. Protesters in Manila chanted "Istanbul is ours," while holding homemade flags bearing the compact's olive branch symbol. A popular Indonesian rapper released a track titled "Red Beret Revolution." Even some Western students began organizing teach-ins on the power of South-South cooperation. The idea of a new world order had escaped its political cradle. It was now cultural. Behind the scenes, Traore remained measured. He met with analysts, legal experts, and digital architects. The compact had momentum, but he knew momentum without infrastructure was a sandcastle in a storm. So he got to work. By week's end, a provisional compact headquarters was announced in Addis Ababa. Servers were secured in Nairobi. A coalition of software engineers from Vietnam, Tunisia, and Nigeria launched the compact cloud, an encrypted digital backbone for inter-member communication, free from US or Chinese surveillance grids. More surprisingly, new partners emerged from unexpected places. Finland offered cybersecurity training. Ireland proposed a universal vaccine distribution protocol, independent of pharmaceutical giants. Colombia volunteered satellite imaging tools. The world wasn't breaking into sides anymore. It was forming new shapes. Meanwhile, Trump's re-election image began to tarnish. The Istanbul incident was now the defining moment of his presidency, and not in the way he wanted. Even some of his allies in Europe quietly distanced themselves. In one particularly humiliating moment, a leaked recording surfaced during the summit. Trump had ordered an influence leak into Traore's personal life, hoping to dig up dirt. The order was denied by his own intelligence chief, who said, "That kid's cleaner than an embassy hallway. You'll only embarrass yourself." He did. Yet Traore remained humble. In an interview with Al Jazeera, when asked if he felt he had defeated the West, he smiled and shook his head. "This is not about defeating. It's about rising. When a tree grows tall, it doesn't pull others down. It simply reaches the light." The clip went viral. In Istanbul, the summit venue now stood empty, but the echoes of that week remained. A statue of an olive branch wrapped around a globe was erected in the plaza where Traore gave his speech. On its base were engraved his words, "We do not want their fall, we want our rise." A year later, the Istanbul Compact had grown to include 22 nations. Trade among members surged by 28%. Cyber attacks on member servers dropped significantly. And for the first time in over 50 years, the World Bank reported a measurable reduction in global economic dependency between the Global South and G7 nations. The US remained powerful, but not supreme. And that was the real revolution. Not a war, not a coup, not a treaty signed at gunpoint. Time at one man standing in the cold light of a historic summit, refusing to bow, and reminding the world that dignity is the first form of power. As the final lines of that summit story were etched into history books, one photo stood above the rest. Not a handshake, not a signature, but Traore on a balcony in Istanbul, raising his beret to a crowd of ordinary people. Turkish, African, Latin American, Asian, all clapping, not for a savior, but for a shift. Because sometimes the most radical thing a leader can do is believe that the world can be better without permission. Denzel Washington walked onto the set of a live leadership summit in Los Angeles, dressed in a crisp navy suit, his stride calm and deliberate. The event was supposed to be straightforward, a panel about integrity, faith, and mentorship, topics Denzel had spoken on many times. The crowd of young professionals and students cheered as he took his seat. His presence alone brought silence, the kind that precedes wisdom. The host smiled and leaned in. "Mr. Washington, as always, it's an honor to have you here." "Thank you," Denzel replied, voice smooth, but with weight. "If what I say helps even one person out there, then I'm grateful for the platform." He was halfway through a powerful story about his mother, how she prayed over him every night during his rebellious teenage years. When something unusual happened, a producer rushed onto the stage, handing the host a small card. The host read it, paused, and looked stunned. "Mr. Washington," he said, clearing his throat, "we've just received a message for you. A live message from the president of Burkina Faso." Denzel blinked. "Burkina Faso." The host nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, and it's not political, it's personal." The massive screen behind them lit up with a golden seal and the words, "Message from President Ibrahim Traore." The room fell dead silent. Denzel leaned back slightly, arms folded, his eyes focused on the screen. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's hear it." The screen faded into a modest room. Wooden desk, warm lighting, a Burkina Faso flag gently swaying in the background. A man with strong, clear eyes appeared, seated, posture noble yet approachable. "Mr. Denzel Washington." The president began in English, his African accent graceful. "I speak to you not as a politician today, but as a man, as a son, and as someone whose life you unknowingly helped shape." Denzel's brow furrowed. In Burkina Faso, Traore continued, "Your face may not be on every screen, but your spirit, your voice, your integrity has traveled. In my village, before I ever held a weapon to defend my people, I saw you in a film, Glory. I didn't fully understand the language, but I saw your eyes, I saw your strength, and something in me shifted." Denzel blinked, mouth tightening, eyes locked. "You played a soldier who endured pain and injustice," the president said, "and you did not blink. That night, I promised myself, I too would rise, I too would serve." The camera briefly panned across a group of young African children, watching the video beside the president. One of them clutched a DVD copy of Remember the Titans. "I have watched your interviews," the president said, voice softening. "The way you speak of your faith, your discipline, your belief in something greater than fame or money. You reminded me that to lead, a man must first kneel in humility." Denzel lowered his head slightly. "I wanted you to know, Mr. Washington, that your life planted seeds here, seeds of resilience, of dignity, of hope. I am one of them." Then Traore leaned forward, eyes intense but warm. "This message is not for television, it is for your soul. You changed the story of a young boy who watched war steal his childhood. You helped him believe in honor." The screen froze. For a long moment, Denzel sat still. The crowd didn't breathe. He finally spoke, voice low. "Play it again," he said. The audience broke into light applause, but Denzel raised his hand. "Please, no clapping. Just, let me sit with this for a second." Backstage, the event organizers debated cutting to commercial, but the host shook his head. "No," he whispered. "He needs this moment. And so do we." The next morning, the video had already gone viral. News outlets from New York to Nairobi ran headlines like "President of Burkina Faso delivers emotional tribute to Denzel Washington," and "An actor's words that inspired a nation." But Denzel wasn't watching the news. He was sitting in a quiet corner of his home, the Los Angeles sun barely spilling through the blinds, rewatching the message alone. He played it again, and again, the words haunted him. Not in a heavy way, but like a song you don't want to forget. The part that gripped him most wasn't even the president's story. It was the pause, the deep silence after the words, "You changed the story of a boy who watched war steal his childhood." He didn't know what to do with that. After decades in Hollywood, Oscars, standing ovations, global recognition, nothing had hit him quite like this, because it wasn't about talent or achievement. It was about meaning, legacy. His phone buzzed. It was his longtime friend and fellow actor, Morgan Freeman, saw the broadcast. "You all right?" Denzel responded, still processing. "That wasn't a message. That was a calling." Morgan replied, "When the world reminds you that you matter, don't just sit with it, walk with it." That line echoed. He didn't go to set that day. He canceled interviews, skipped meetings, and walked out onto his balcony with a cup of black coffee. For a long time he just stood there, thinking. He thought about his mother, the one who raised him with discipline and prayer, about the time he almost gave up acting in his 20s, about the kids he visited in Harlem schools, who called him Uncle Denzel with big expectant eyes. And then he thought about a barefoot boy in Burkina Faso, who saw him in glory and decided not to quit on life. That evening, his assistant entered the study. "Mr. Washington, there's something you should see." On the iPad, she pulled up a live news feed. President Ibrahim Traore was standing in the courtyard of a small school in Ouagadougou. Dozens of children surrounded him, each holding up a handmade sign. Some had Denzel's name, others simply read, "Thank you for your voice." Then the camera zoomed in on one little girl. She couldn't have been more than 10 years old. In her hands was a worn notebook. She stepped forward, her voice small but steady. My name is AWA. My papa died in war. My mama is sick. But one day, I saw a movie. A man with tears in his eyes, but he never gave up. He helped me believe that one day, I can be more than my sadness. AWA opened the notebook and read, Dear Mr. Denzel, you don't know us, but we know you. We listen to your words, even if we don't understand every sentence. We feel your strength. We pray with your movies. We believe because you believed. Denzel stared at the screen. AWA closed her book, smiled shyly, and stepped back. The children clapped. The president raised his hand and said, He may be in America, but his heart is already here. Denzel leaned back in his chair. The room was silent. Then he whispered, What do I do with this? His assistant replied, You answer the call. That night, Denzel wrote a letter, not typed, handwritten, in bold strokes of black ink. He addressed it to President Traore. No press release, no public statement. Just a man writing to another man across the world. Mr. President, your message moved me more than I can say. It reminded me that the true weight of our words can't be measured by applause, but by the lives they quietly touch. I've played many roles in my life, but none of them matter more than the one I didn't know I was playing. The role of hope. If I have a place in the hearts of your people, I want to see it with my own eyes. I want to meet AWA. I want to walk through the village where your grandmother's market stall once stood. Not as a celebrity, but as a brother, as a son of the same struggle. Sincerely, Denzel Washington. He folded the letter, placed it in a linen envelope, and handed it to his assistant. No social media, just send it through the consulate. Let it find its way. Later that night, Denzel sat quietly in his private home theater. He didn't play one of his own films. He chose Glory. It had been years since he watched it from start to finish. As the film played, he watched his younger self on screen, fierce, angry, unbroken, and wept quietly in the dark. The flight from Los Angeles to Ouagadougou was nearly 20 hours with layovers, but to Denzel Washington it felt like a lifetime in reflection. He wasn't flying with press or security detail, just his assistant, a translator, and 2 small bags. No tuxedos, no press suits. He wanted to arrive as simply as possible. On the way to the airport, his driver had looked in the rearview mirror and asked gently, Mr. Washington, why now? Why this trip? Denzel had answered with quiet certainty, because sometimes God sends a whisper so loud you can't ignore it. And now, somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, that whisper felt like a roar in his chest. He watched clouds drift beneath the plane, replaying moments from the message again and again in his mind. Traore's words, Awa's voice, the handmade signs, the silence between sentences that spoke louder than applause ever could. When the plane finally landed in Burkina Faso, it was just after sunrise. The air was warm, dry, and filled with a scent Denzel couldn't quite describe, earthy, rich, unfamiliar, but somehow comforting. A convoy was waiting for him. Not government limousines or black-tinted SUVs, just 2 old Toyota Land Cruisers and 3 local drivers with genuine smiles. A young aide stepped forward holding a simple wooden sign, Welcome, Brother Denzel. As Denzel stepped off the plane, his shoes touched the dusty runway and his breath caught. The world felt quieter here, or maybe it was just his soul finally hearing itself. He nodded to the aide. Thank you for having me. We're honored, the young man replied. The president is waiting, but the drive didn't take them to a palace. Not yet. The convoy turned away from the city center and headed toward a small village about an hour east. Along the way, children ran along dirt roads, waving wildly. Some held signs with hand-drawn portraits of Denzel. Others simply shouted, Glory, or Remember the Titans. He smiled, then laughed. They know my movies? The translator beside him chuckled. They know your heart. When they arrived, the village was already awake with life. Women drawing water from a well, elders sitting in shaded corners sipping tea, children chasing each other barefoot with boundless energy. But when the first Land Cruiser pulled in, everything stopped. Dozens of villagers turned, eyes wide, and began to gather. Then President Ibrahim Traore, emerged from a nearby hut, not in a suit, but in traditional cloth, barefoot, with a quiet humility that spoke volumes. He walked slowly toward the vehicle as Denzel stepped out. The two men locked eyes, no ceremony, no speeches. Traore opened his arms and embraced Denzel like a brother long lost. "You came," he said. "I had to," Denzel replied. They stood there for a moment, saying nothing. It was the kind of silence that held decades, lifetimes, and invisible bridges between worlds. The president gestured toward the center of the village. "There's someone I want you to meet." They walked side by side through the narrow paths between mud brick homes, past goats, and curious children. Finally, they arrived at a small mango tree near a clay school building. Under its shade stood AWA. She wore a bright yellow dress, faded at the edges, and clutched her notebook to her chest like it was treasure. Her eyes were wide, nervous, hopeful. Traore stopped a few feet away. "AWA," he said gently. "He's here." Denzel took a deep breath and approached slowly, his own hands shaking. He knelt so he could look her in the eyes. "You must be AWA," he said softly. She nodded barely above a whisper. "Yes. May I see your notebook?" Without a word, she handed it to him. He opened it and saw the letter again, written in imperfect English, full of emotion and innocence. He read it silently, tears beginning to pool. When he finished, he looked up at her. "I came all this way," he said, voice cracking, "because your words found me. And I want you to know, I believe in you too." AWA was lip trembled. Then she did something unexpected. She reached out and hugged him. The villagers around them clapped quietly. Some wiped tears, and Denzel, still kneeling, whispered, "Thank you, little sister." Later that afternoon, Traore led Denzel to the old market stall where his grandmother used to sell fruit. The wooden beams had mostly collapsed, but a few rusted nails and scattered baskets still marked the space. "This," Traore said, "is where I first heard your voice, on a crackling radio." My grandmother didn't understand the words, but she felt the power. He bent down, picked up a small smooth stone, and handed it to Denzel. "She would have called you her son," Traore said. "This is from her stall. Keep it." Denzel took the stone, closed his fist around it, and nodded. "I don't have words, only gratitude." As the sun dipped low, the president and the actor sat together on two wooden stools, sipping ginger tea. Children played nearby. A gentle wind rustled the tree leaves above them. Denzel turned to his host. "I came here thinking I was giving something, but it's me who's receiving." Traore smiled. "The world doesn't need more noise, Mr. Washington. It needs more heart. You brought yours." That night, as stars filled the African sky, Denzel lay awake under a mosquito net in a modest guest hut. In his hand was the small stone from the market, and in his heart was something he hadn't felt in years: peace. The morning sun cast a golden hue over the village, filtering through the woven reed windows of the guest hut. Denzel awoke before dawn, the sounds of roosters and distant chatter blending with a strange new rhythm that was already beginning to feel familiar. Outside, the village was stirring. Women swept the earth with bundled straw brooms, and children began their morning chores. But today was different. There was an energy in the air, anticipation, like the world was holding its breath for something sacred. Denzel stepped outside and was greeted by the soft voice of the young translator. "President Traore requests your presence at the school. The children have prepared something special, still barefoot, still wearing the simple white linen shirt gifted to him the night before." Denzel walked the narrow path through the village, with dust rising gently at his feet. He passed elders who smiled without speaking, only nodding deeply in respect. He nodded back, placing a hand over his heart. As he reached the schoolyard, he saw a small gathering under the large mango tree. Wooden benches were arranged in rows, and a makeshift stage of flattened crates stood at the front. The children, all ages, all sizes, sat cross-legged, eyes wide with excitement. President Traore stood waiting at the side, hands clasped behind his back, dressed again in traditional attire, this time with the ceremonial sash of his country draped across one shoulder. He gestured toward the bench next to him. "Sit, brother. Watch what they have prepared." Denzel sat down, unsure of what was about to unfold. The sun filtered through the mango leaves, dappling the children's faces with light. Then the drums began, soft at first, barely audible. A rhythm built gently from the hands of two teenage boys, tapping hollow gourds. Then the voices came, a chorus of children's voices, pure and untrained, sang in the native tongue of Moray. Though Denzel didn't understand the words, he felt the message. The melody was hauntingly familiar, ancient and full of warmth. He blinked, confused. Why did it stir something so deep in him? He turned to the translator. What are they singing? The translator, teary-eyed, leaned closer. It is a lullaby, a song President Traore's grandmother used to hum while selling fruit. The children sing it now in her honor, but also for your grandmother. Denzel's breath caught. He stared ahead as the melody washed over him. It was soft, steady, almost like a whisper from a memory. The tune, though foreign, rang inside his bones. It was the same kind of hum his own grandmother used to sing in the projects of New York when he cried as a child. A song without words, only comfort. Two grandmothers, two continents, one melody. When the song ended, the children clapped for themselves, laughing and bowing. A WA, now more confident than the day before, stepped forward, holding something in her hands. It was a carved wooden statue, two open hands holding a heart. She handed it to Denzel and spoke in English this time. This is for you, because you held our hearts, even when you didn't know it. Denzel took it in both hands. He couldn't speak. His lips trembled as he stood, lifting the statue gently. I don't deserve this, he said. President Traore placed a hand on his shoulder. That's why you do. The villagers applauded softly, not as fans, but as family. Denzel stepped forward and turned to them, eyes glistening. I have received many awards in my life, gold statues, standing ovations, but none like this, he said, lifting the wooden carving. This is my greatest honor. The moment lingered like a prayer in the wind. Later that afternoon, President Traore invited Denzel on a quiet walk outside the village. They strolled along a dusty path, the tall grass brushing against their arms. Birds chirped in the trees above, and every few minutes, villagers passed by on bicycles or carts, each tipping their heads with reverence. I want to show you something, Traore said. They stopped at a small clearing, surrounded by sunflowers and quiet trees. At the center stood a tree, old, thick, and twisted with time. A wooden bench sat beneath it, worn and smooth. This, said Traore, is where I made the decision to join the army. I was only 16. My grandmother had just passed. I sat under this tree and listened to your voice on a borrowed radio. You were speaking at a college. You said dreams without goals are just dreams. And ultimately, they fueled disappointment. I didn't understand everything, but I understood purpose. Denzel sat slowly on the bench. You remembered all that? Traore nodded. When a man has nothing, words are all he has, and yours stayed with me. The president reached into his satchel and pulled out a rolled-up document, tied with red thread. He handed it to Denzel. What is this? Denzel asked. A deed, Traore said quietly. This land, it's yours now, a gift from Burkina Faso. Denzel's eyes widened. I can't accept land from your people. You can, Traore said gently, because it's not just land. It's memory, it's heritage. It's proof that your words built something here, something that will last. Denzel looked around. The wind rustled the sunflowers. The old tree swayed ever so slightly. In that moment, he felt the burden of fame lift, replaced by something weightier: legacy. I'll build a reading library here, he said softly. For the children, a place where words can live. Traore smiled. Then it is already holy ground. They sat together until the sun dipped low, saying little. Just two men, one once barefoot in war, the other once directionless in New York, sitting on a bench under an African sky, united by grandmothers, by struggle, by hope. The day of departure arrived quietly. There were no official parades, no flashing cameras, no celebrity spectacle, just the soft rustle of wind in the village trees, and the silent gathering of dozens of children, elders and villagers under the rising sun, waiting to say goodbye. Denzel Washington stood at the edge of the village, a worn satchel slung over his shoulder. He had traded his crisp American wardrobe for a simple cotton tunic made by local artisans. In his hand, he carried only two things: a carved wooden statue and the deed to the land beneath the sunflower tree. President Traore approached slowly. "You sure you want to leave without a formal farewell?" he asked. Denzel nodded. "This was never about formalities. You welcomed me like family. That's more than enough." Awaz appeared beside them, her eyes shy but steady. She held a small folded letter in her hands. "I wrote you one more note," she said. Denzel knelt beside her, accepted it with reverence, and placed it gently into the inner pocket of his tunic. "Thank you," he whispered. "I'll carry your voice with me, and we will carry yours," she replied. Before leaving, Denzel asked for one final moment under the mango tree. The villagers followed, forming a circle of quiet reverence as he stepped into the center. He looked up at the leaves, the sunlight slipping through, just as it had days earlier when the children sang. He raised the wooden carving above his head, not as a trophy, but as an offering. "This heart," he said, his voice steady, "belongs to all of us now." Then he turned to the children. "Don't stop dreaming, but don't just dream. Build, read, love each other. You don't need to be famous to be powerful. You just need to care." The silence that followed was holy. As Denzel climbed into the vehicle, a wave of small hands reached for him, hands clapping, waving, touching his arm one last time. Awaza stood back, hand over her chest, tears forming, but not falling. Strong, like the leaders she admired. The convoy pulled away slowly. Denzel kept the window open, watching the village shrink in the distance. His fingers absently traced the edge of the carved heart in his lap. The drive back to the capital was long, quiet. The city buzzed with life, markets, horns, people, but Denzel didn't hear it. His mind was full of mango trees, old radios, lullabies, and a little girl who called him brother. At the airport, a security officer stopped him before boarding. "Mr. Washington," the man said in halting English, "thank you for remembering us." Denzel placed a hand on the officer's shoulder. "Halls, no.
Institutions.
Thank you for never forgetting yourselves." The flight back to Los Angeles felt shorter, though the hours passed the same. This time, Denzel didn't watch a film. He didn't read. He just sat still, hands folded, Awa's final letter in his lap. As the plane touched down, the city greeted him with its usual neon sprawl and chaos. His assistant asked, "Would you like to call the press? Let them know you're back." He shook his head. "No cameras, no headlines. This one's just for me." At home, Denzel returned to his study. The room was quiet, lined with awards and scripts, trophies and accolades, but it felt different now. Smaller, or perhaps, he had grown. He placed the wooden heart at the center of the shelf, above his Oscars. Then slowly, he opened Awa's final letter. "Dear brother Denzel, I used to think famous people lived in the sky, that they were stars we could never touch. But now I know, stars walk on earth too. And sometimes they visit little girls in yellow dresses and remind them that their voice matters. Thank you for coming. I will never forget your eyes. Your sister, AWA." He pressed the letter to his lips. That week he didn't return to filming. Instead, he called architects and educators. Within days, he'd sent a team to begin construction on the reading library he promised. He named it Awa's Place, a house for words. He also sent a scholarship fund to the village, enough for every child to attend secondary school and for the teachers to be trained with new materials. But Denzel didn't stop there. During his next public speech, a leadership conference for thousands of youth across America, he walked on stage holding a picture of AWA and a sunflower. "This is the face of a world changer," he said. He told the whole story, not to inspire pity or applause, but to spark movement, to remind people that hope isn't reserved for the rich, that sometimes the loudest truths come from the smallest voices. After the speech, the internet exploded. Hashtags trended. #Denzel, In Burkina hash hearts across oceans hash a was place. But Denzel stayed quiet online. Because to him, it wasn't about trending. It was about planting. And back in Burkina Faso, under the mango tree, AWA, and the children, now gathered every week at the construction site. They wrote poems, read stories, sang that same grandmother's song. They didn't know if Denzel would ever return, but they knew he had never truly left. Because when someone sees you, truly sees you, and calls you family, they never really go. They stay in your voice, in your steps, in your soil. And as the wooden doors of Abel's place were opened for the first time, carved above them were the words, "Let every word be a seed."